President of Socialist International, George Papandreou, Mr. Secretary General Louis Ayala, President Mahmoud Abbas, dear Mona Sahlin, His Excellency Mr. Jalal Talabani, President of Iraq, distinguished members of the dais, comrades. It is a great honor for me to participate once again in the Socialist International Congress, an organization we have been members of for some 5 decades and whose values we share. We are a family of like-minded parties dedicated to strengthening social democracy and social justice, peace and security, and to making our world a better place to live in. I have the honor to lead and represent here the Israeli Labour Party. With me, a Member of Parliament, Colette Avital, Member of Parliament, Ofir Pines, and 2 members of the Young Guard, Mayana Modei and Abu Erez. They might be able to answer some of the tougher questions that I probably can't and you will raise. My party is committed to these values and is actively involved in helping combat hunger, disease and suffering around the world. Mr. President, comrades, it gives me a great pleasure to speak here about the important cause of peace between Israelis and Palestinians and between Israelis and the Arab world. We come to this meeting from the troubled and stormy waters of the Middle East, where a dramatic tug of war between pragmatic and radical forces is currently taking place. Those who support the values of socialism have a clear interest in the triumph of peace and progress over radicalism for the benefit of us all. We come from a region torn by decades of strife, wars, and violence. There have been constant threats to Israel's existence. A member of the United Nations, Iran, continuously threatens to wipe Israel off the map. But there has been some hopeful progress too. The peace agreements with Egypt and Jordan have brought a new era, and the basis for a peace process between us and our other immediate neighbors, the Palestinians, Syrians and Lebanese, has always been maintained. And yet, peace with our immediate neighbors and partners, the Palestinians, has been elusive since the hopes of the early 90s. Now, after 8 years of renewed violence and bloodshed, the Annapolis Conference has brought new hopes for the peace process. However, this is an enormous challenge, as the situation has changed over the years since I initiated the Camp David process, and not all for the better. I fully support the Annapolis process and will do my utmost to help it succeed. In my view, there are 3 main factors critical to the advancement of this process that must take place simultaneously. First, the peace negotiations. These started in Annapolis and are currently continued between Prime Minister Olmert and President Abbas. I probably will learn more about it after meeting with President Abbas here. We all hope there will be progress there, and they should, without the setting of strict deadlines, as the future of a 2-state solution is at stake. The second factor is improving the quality of life for Palestinians and implementing economic projects on the ground. The support of international community and institutional capacity building for Palestinians is critical, and the European Union envoy Tony Blair is doing important work in raising international funds and creating new economic opportunities. Together with Mr. Blair and Palestinian Prime Minister Salam Fayyad, I am doing my best to help facilitate this endeavor. The third element relates to the precarious situation in the Gaza Strip under the reign of Hamas. Hamas and its leadership has a choice, either to accept the quartet conditions and make themselves a legitimate political actor, including the release of our abducted soldier Gilad Shalit, or they continue in the ways of violence, firing rockets on our civilians, as Mona just described, leaving us no choice but to defend our citizens. I should tell you that the situation in Gaza is extremely frustrating for us as Israelis. Just 3 years ago, no other than Sharon, toward the end of his active political career, made a gallant U-turn and ordered the pullout of Israelis after almost 40 years from the Gaza Strip. He ordered the pullout to the last settler, the last soldier, the last checkpoint. All the Israeli settlements were flattened, including public institutions and synagogues, and the last Israeli left the Gaza Strip. The Gaza Strip remained for the first time in decades in the hands of Palestinians, the Palestinian Authority alone. No single Israeli in sight. Israelis expected naturally that the Gaza Strip will turn into a pilot, into an example of what could follow in the West Bank, and that there will be calm. What eventually happened was that Hamas took over, at first through certain achievements in the elections, and then through coup d'etat from the Palestinian Authority, and we turn probably 250,000 of Israelis a target for indiscriminated attacks against citizens, something that I don't believe that any sovereign country, any of your governments would have accepted as a practice of life. And that, of course, influences what Israelis have in mind about giving up control of actions against terror in the West Bank. Israelis thought that probably violence will continue somehow on the West Bank, but we will see together with the Palestinians an example of how life could have turned into something better in the Gaza Strip. Before we are forced to act militarily in self-defense in the Gaza Strip, we are committed to exploring every other avenue, including the current attempt at bringing about a period of cooling off, which also provides a well-needed breathing spell for both the peace process and the effort to release Shalit, the abducted soldier. I've listened very carefully to President Abbas, whom I highly respect, and I have to make 4 short remarks. Number one, Jerusalem, our capital, had never in the last 2,000 years were more open for observers of all 3 great religions to work or to execute their services vis-à-vis the Lord. Secondly, what really influenced the issues more than anything else is the phenomena of suicide bombing, terror, something that any normal, free society should be ready to fight determinedly. Israel suffered after we ended at Camp David, proposing the Palestinians a fully independent state, contiguous over 100% of the Gaza Strip and 90+% of the West Bank, with a connection between 2 areas and even certain heavily populated Arab neighborhoods in Jerusalem as part of the Palestinian capital. It ended up with the previous president, Mr. Arafat, rejecting it even as a basis for negotiations and deliberately and consciously turning to terror. And we have a primary contact with our citizens, the same kind of which you have with your own citizens, to protect their life against indiscriminate terror which took place at bus stations, restaurants, pizza shops, Passover ceremonies, and you name it. The moment there will be an effective change of law enforcement on the Palestinian side, from police that will arrest not just criminals, as they are effectively doing, but also terrorist activists, and courts that can judge them, and prisons that can hold them until they serve their indictment or their penalty, the situation will change. There are many steps that had been done recently by President Abbas and Prime Minister Fayyad to provide these improvements, but the way is still long, and we have to be slightly or a little bit more patient. And last remark, Israel was always ready and is ready now as it was ready in 92, 93, in 2000, and we are ready to make peace. There is a huge silent majority, much beyond the limits of our party. Probably 80% of Israelis are ready to sign a deal based on the basic elements that are on the table for 15 years, to put an end to the conflict, to put an end to mutual claims, and to bring about a normal situation that you enjoy in almost any other part of the world, where two nations are living side by side, recognizing each other as what we really are, and trying to make the future of our children better. Unfortunately, in spite of the courageous and determined leadership of President Abbas and his colleagues, until now, we cannot see such a solid peace camp ready to strike a deal on the Palestinian side, and we can see, unfortunately, the too many terrorists that are turning sometimes stronger rather than weaker. To our north, the lines of confrontation between extremists and pragmatists extend to Lebanon, with Hezbollah tripling its arsenal of rockets since the Second Lebanon War and threatening domestic Lebanese stability. Syria is a key player here. It is currently an active member of the radical axis, but Syria is not a natural member of this Shiite banana. For this reason, and against the backdrop of Iranian nuclearization, while maintaining a deterrence posture vis-à-vis Syria, Israel is simultaneously exploring the opportunity for dialogue with Syria. I have tried it 8 years ago with Assad Sr. Now we are trying with Assad Jr., President Bashar, and we can only hope that the Syrians take the right path at this juncture. We also hope to extend our peaceful relations to further neighbors, like Iraq. And the overarching threat of our region and beyond, I might add, is Iran and its nuclear armament ambitions. This is a most real and urgent threat that must be taken seriously, and I urge the international community to enhance economic and diplomatic pressure on Iran. The international community must not allow Iran to go nuclear. Mr. President, comrades, in this changing Middle East, it is the responsibility of pragmatic leaders, and I salute here President Mahmoud Abbas as one of them, to join hands in developing a common strategy to contain radicalism. We all realize that peace and security are not mere dreams. They are a strategic need, and time is of the essence. These common understandings and shared strategic interests must guide us in achieving our goals: 2 states for 2 people, Palestine alongside Israel, freedom, dignity, and security for all. I would like to assure you that we on our part remain committed to achieving these goals. As socialists, as progressives, as Democrats, we have a moral obligation. Our politics must be politics of responsibility. Responsibility to our people, to our environment, to our neighborhood, to each other, to help build a better world for our children. Thank you very much.